Council committee meetings. We'll start off with our Human Resources Committee. Mr. Werman.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the Human Resources Committee. Sitting on the committee are Councilman Boykin, Councilman Honeycutt, Councilman Pryor, myself, and then obviously Chairman Sass sits on all committees. First item on the agenda for tonight is approval of the minutes of September 7th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. Minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda is paid leave policy. You know, I understand our staff, well, I know our staff received a lot of comments the last time this was before us, and you know, I understand that they've kind of come back and maybe have a number of different sort of proposals they'd like to put forward to council. I don't know if that makes sense, Ms. Holden, to just have you do that, or very good. Okay, I jotted things down, but very good. Well, Ms. Holden will, I think, outline a number of sort of alternatives, and maybe we can have some discussion after that.
Okay, thank you very much. So staff, first of all, we wanted to make sure that we were identifying the problem correctly and that it is council's intention and staff's intention to provide a paid leave benefit that could be used for birthing parents, could be used for non-birthing parents, and also could be used for other full-time employees who have a medical issue. So we've come up with some options, and we've met with the senior leadership team, and we would like to first present to you what they propose as the best of the options. So there are two parts to this. The first would be that we increase the sick leave accrual so that an employee at the end of their first year would have earned 160 hours of sick leave. This paid sick leave accrual would give them, for most employees who are working an 80-hour week, or sorry, a 40-hour week, it would give them 4 weeks of paid sick time. They can use that one day at a time, or if this is a mother giving birth, that could all be used at one time. It could also be used for the non-birthing parent to take bonding time with that new baby. It also could be used for adoption as well. And coupled with that, we would like to also increase the annual leave accrual rate so that beginning upon employment, they would be accruing 3 weeks or 120 hours of annual leave. Right now, they accrue 2 weeks or 80 hours. We want to increase that and keep that going until they reach the end of their 9th year, when another week or another 40 hours would be added to it. And that's the current schedule. So we have a recruiting problem. And one of the main issues that continues to come up is candidates are coming to us and they have already 3 weeks of vacation wherever they're working. And when we tell them they only get 2 weeks and they only get 2 weeks for 5 years, they're just shaking their heads at us. It makes no sense. So we would like to turn that so that new hires would start accruing at that rate, so they'd have the 120 hours or 3 weeks. And of course, that would continue. That maxes out at 480 hours, and otherwise it rolls over from year to year. The sick leave, on the other hand, does not max out. That continues to roll over. One of the big advantages with the sick leave, that although it can accrue, when an employee leaves Charleston County, that's not paid out to them. So that is not a liability for the county as the hours accrue. So we believe that this is the most equitable way to make sure that we are taking care of those birthing parents and taking care of the non-birthing parent, as well as offering something for employees at all stages in their lives and depending on whatever medical situation would come up with them. So we do have some other options. Would you like to hear those, or would you like to talk about just that one first?
I would like to hear the other options.
Okay. So we could do just paid maternity leave, and that would be 160 hours of paid leave at the time an employee gives birth. The benefit would be offered to all full-time employees after their first year of employment. Then we would also give you an option of paid parental leave. So that would be 80 hours of paid leave for the birthing parent in addition to the maternity leave. And it would be 80 hours of paid leave for the non-birthing parent or an adoptive parent. The benefit would be offered to all full-time employees after the first year of employment. We also have looked into buying a short-term disability policy on all employees, all full-time employees. And this comes with a price tag, obviously. That one is one that we can tell you the cost on fairly closely. It would need to go through the procurement process, but in looking around, it's looking like it's about $600 per covered employee per year. And that short-term policy would be like all other short-term disability policies. There'd be a 14-day waiting period, and then after that, it would pay at 2/3 of their salary for 90 days. So those are the options that we'd like to put before you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Any questions? Councilwoman Honeycutt.
Just so I understand the first couple that you laid out, if an employee were to be employed for a whole year, they would, under this new policy you've proposed, they would get 120 days of sick leave, is that correct?
Hours.
No.
Hours. How many
One-
days is that?
Well, sick leave would be 160 hours or 20 days. And when we're talking now, we have to talk as if we're talking about a 40-hour week employee, because we have a formula that we use for those who work 12-hour days, 24-hour days. It comes back to the same benefit for every employee, but just to understand what we're saying, we're talking about what it would be for that person that works 40 hours a week.
And then the annual leave was,
So that is 120 hours, which is equal to 15 days.
so if that employee were to obtain a short-term disability policy, they would have enough time after their first year to cover the 14-day wait, and then the short-term disability would take for, I forget how long that is, 6 weeks?
If it's for maternity,
Sure.
It's what the doctor says, and typically that is 6 weeks. And I'm sorry, I forgot to bring that point up. We've had AFLAC as our short-term disability for coming up 1 year now, and that's continuing as well.
And that enrollment is still open for any employees who want to obtain that once a decision is made on this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and so essentially, all employees would have these benefits of the 3-week sick leave, the 15-day annual leave, not just someone in the position of becoming a parent, although it would also include people that were becoming parents, correct?
That is correct.
All right. I have to be honest, during our last discussion of this, I got a very compelling message from someone watching who was a county employee who said, well, what about us that have no children or can't have children? And that was really concerning to me. And I know as a mother that a parental policy is very important, but I do think that should apply to everyone. You may be taking care of an aging parent. You may be taking care of a child that you already have that's ill, that you may need that leave for. And I do think it makes us more competitive in this recruitment effort. We are facing challenges trying to recruit folks, and so if this makes a difference in someone saying yes to the county and that talent coming to us, I think that is a huge step forward. So I do like that idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilman Kabrowski.
Thank you very much. I think this is a great thing so that, parents and children can be connected, and it can be invaluable both for the parent and the baby. And I have to ask, what is a birthing parent? I don't know what that means.
Well, it's language that we are supposed to be using now, so birthing parent is the one who actually gives birth.
Have we, and again, I think the policy is great, and I'm all in favor of connecting parents and children. Have we adopted a policy by the council to call a parent? I'm unaware that we've officially adopted such a policy. Maybe it was adopted before I was on council, but I don't remember respectfully that coming in front of us.
Council has not addressed that.
I would be in favor of saying a mother. This, for my point, I'm not on the committee, and I respect any parent, and I didn't know whether you meant an adoptive parent as a birthing parent, but well, you've answered it, and that's just my feeling on it, because I didn't remember adopting a policy with that language, but thank you very much.
Mr. Chair? Yes, Councilman Boykin.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a
I got a
motion.
question.
Okay, go
I got a
ahead.
question. So when we first started this journey, it was supposed to be just about mothers, parents giving birth to children, right? So when did it take the turn to go to include all employees? I mean, I thought you always wanted to bring back something to us that related to the birth of a child, but now it looked like it's incorporated in all the employees. So, I mean, when did that direction change, and who changed that direction?
At the council meeting, Chairman Sass asked us to come back with options.
With options, but the first one we wanted was just to take care of parental rights, right? I think that's what this council directed, and then, and I was looking for that, plus options, but we didn't get anything just for those folks who were, having kids and being, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Councilman Pryor, I think my understanding from my meeting with staff was that these 4 or 5 options, I guess, that have been laid out, we could pass one of them, we could pass 5 of them. So, I think that, the idea of a paid maternity leave of 4 weeks for the birthing parent or mother, if you prefer that, and then 2 weeks for, what is generally called sort of parental leave that would be applicable to both parents. That is, as I see it, that's a 1-year vesting, which is, more than I probably would have preferred, but I think that, addresses some concerns we've heard. So that is sort of what I am viewing, at least, and this is a 1 of 9 view, but that is what I view as the sort of more standard. We talked about bring something back that sort of corresponds with what the state and the city and all that. I think those 2 options combined are that. And then there's obviously sort of sick leave accrual and annual leave, and then the short-term disability, which are sort of alternative options. So I do think that option is on the table, Councilman Pryor.
Which option?
The option of having it being focused as a, sort of maternity and parental leave.
And that's option number 1?
I don't know that they were given numbers, but I think it is the option of having 4 weeks for maternity leave and
2 weeks
2 weeks for parental leave.
Yeah, and that's,
Okay. And, I'll just say, and happy to entertain some motions on this. I kind of share your view, Councilman Pryor, that I think this started as a discussion about mothers and parents more generally. And, I got to obviously respect, if there are folks who feel differently about that, that's certainly, folks are entitled to their opinions. But I do think that there is something distinctive about sort of having that being set aside and not saying, well, you have to go into all of your other benefits to do that. I think that is something that's distinctive. I think it's something that a lot of people in the market are viewing as distinctive. I'm a little bit not sure that, we do get as many sort of recruiting benefits out of it, but I also just don't know, my understanding is the city, and obviously a smaller group of folks, but my understanding is the city budgeted like $36,000 for this. Now, they have no idea if that's going to be the amount that ultimately comes out, but I would be happy to vote for something that addresses these broader issues. But I do think having something that is distinctively for parents and well, parents, I guess, that is something that I think is important, because it doesn't seem that I don't really see any economic reason not to do it, and I think that there's some, other reasons to go ahead and do it. In any event, if there's anyone else, I'm sorry, Mr. Boykin, Mr. Sass.
Okay, thank you.
Or Mr. Sands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. We had a pretty good discussion about this a couple of weeks ago, and I did ask Ms. Holden to come back with different options. And I, too, was concerned about other employees, and I was concerned about, our recruiting and not only recruiting, but retention of our current employees. And so this allows all of our employees to have benefits. They have to manage them. They have to manage them a little bit, but I think this is very clean. It's very clear, and I'm in favor of the sick leave accrual and the annual leave accrual. I think both of those are big improvements to what we have now, and gives us an opportunity to not only help our current employees, but in our recruiting as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sass. Councilman Boykin.
I'll start with discussion and then make my motion if that's permissible.
I
Mr.
understand.
Chair? Okay. I would offer at first, I viewed all the options. I was one of the champions, I suppose, at the beginning of all this of trying to push some type of parental leave, but I'm always open to collaboration. And in this case, I think the sole focus on parental leave was exclusive. And I think this is a good compromise that's going to be inclusive, that gives our employees the flexibility to use these hours that best suits their needs, rather than us dictating it can only be used in a certain way at a certain time. And I think I agree with the chair that it will aid in our recruiting and retention. And with all that, I will make the motion to increase annual leave accrual rate for full-time county employees working an 80-hour pay period to a total of 120 hours per year from the start of employment until their 9th year. The annual leave accrual rates for employees working other schedules are to be proportionately increased. I further move to increase the sick leave accrual rate for full-time county employees working an 80-hour pay period to a total of 160 hours per year. The sick leave accrual rates for employees working other schedules are to be proportionally increased. These actions will be effective for the pay period starting January 12, 2024. That was my motion, sir.
Second.
Any discussion?
Let me make sure that we got those numbers right on the hours. Can we check that? Did we get those numbers right on the hours?
It'd be 160 hours for the sick, and it would be 120 hours for annual leave.
Thank you.
Call for the question.
Call the question.
Yes, sir.
All right, all in favor, again, there's only 5 people who are voting on this, just to remind folks. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion passes. That will be on the, does this go through finance?
No, sir. It goes straight to,
Right, yeah, no, this will be on county council agenda, I assume Tuesday. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. We do have one other item on the agenda. Actually, Chairman Sass, do you want to take it in order, or this is an executive session? Okay, very good. So we have a need for an executive session. We have to deal with a personnel matter regarding the county administrator's contract. Entertain any motions from the committee.
Move to go to executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. All right. Going into the executive session, we will be back probably relatively shortly. All right. All right. Thanks, everyone. We are back from executive session. No action was taken, no votes were no votes were taken, or action was taken. That concludes the Human Resources Committee meeting for today. So I will turn it back to Chairman Sass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Werman. Next meeting is Planning and Public Works. Mr. Moody?
Sass, all members of council participate in planning and public works. First order of business is approval of the minutes from October 5.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Second, Mr. Boykin. Thank you. Any additions, corrections? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2 was just a discussion item from our last council meeting. I think Councilman Wehrman, you had maybe raised some thoughts, and I thought we'd just have a little roundtable about some of the gaps, I guess, some of the concerns you had about the HPC and
I mean, I definitely.
I think you did.
I definitely raised concerns. I think
Yep.
the idea was something of a timing issue, and I think staff looks like they are prepared to talk about it.
Yeah.
We have a short presentation.
Okay.
To compare the R4 and S3.
That would be great.
I think that's where we were going.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Mr.
For the options.
Thank you. So good evening. Staff was directed by council to compile a presentation detailing the current zoning within the 10-mile community, along with a discussion about the special management S3 zoning district. So the 10-mile community is located within the Awandale area of unincorporated Charleston County. The 10-mile community historic district, which was adopted in June of 2022, includes 458 properties. The community is divided by the urban growth boundary, placing a portion of 10 Mile within the urban suburban area of the county and another section within the rural area of the county. This map shows the 10 Mile Community Historic District in yellow. Staff has also been processing amendments to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which received first reading approval by council last week. These changes include items such as consistency with state law, updating of approval criteria, and the ability to adopt contributing resources and area character appraisals. The Historic Preservation Ordinance currently regulates 908 properties within unincorporated Charleston County, which represent 65 different National Register and locally designated historic properties and districts. There are several zoning tools that can be utilized to address the concerns of the 10-mile community, which include overlay zoning districts and rezoning. The overlay zoning district process would involve working closely with the community to draft a specialized community zoning specific to the 10-mile community. Staff has completed several of these overlays in the past, including for the Parkers Ferry and Saul Legree communities. It's important to note, however, that these possible zoning changes do not negate the need to amend the Historic Preservation Ordinance. The second option would be what's considered a straight rezoning of the R4 properties to the Special Management S3 district. As previously mentioned, the 10-mile community is divided by the UGB. So tonight we'll be focusing our attention on the urban-suburban area of the community. So this map shows the current zoning within the urban-suburban area of 10 Mile. The properties shown in yellow are zoned low-density residential R4 and total 338 parcels. There are also 4 properties shown in maroon, which are zoned urban residential, also known as UR. Properties where the aerial imagery is showing represent those that have been annexed into the town of Mount Pleasant. This table shows the density, intensity, and dimensional standards for both the R4 and UR zoning districts, so those zoning districts present currently in the 10-mile community. Maximum density in these areas are 4 and 16 dwelling units per acre, respectively. You can also see the minimum lot area in R4 with public water and sewer is 5,000 square feet, and that there is no minimum lot area in the UR zoning district. The R4 zoning district allows for 40% maximum impervious surface coverage, whereas the UR district allows for 50% coverage. Additionally, the maximum building height in R4 is 35 feet, but the maximum building height in UR is 4 stories or 50 feet, whichever is less. This table shows the allowed land uses in the R4 zoning district, starting with the by right allowed uses on the left, conditionally allowed uses in the center, and uses requiring special exception approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals in the right-hand side. And this is that same table for the UR zoning district. So next, I'll move on and discuss the special management S3 zoning district. So here are the density, intensity, and dimensional standards for the S3 zoning district. They include a maximum density of 3 principal dwelling units per acre and a minimum lot area of 12,500 square feet with public water or sewer. The maximum impervious surface coverage is 40% of the lot, and the maximum building height is 35 feet. Here is that table of the allowed land uses for the S3 zoning district. So again, on the left-hand side are by right allowed uses. In the center are uses allowed subject to conditions. And on the right are uses that require special exception approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this slide provides a comparison between the current R4 zoning density, intensity, and dimensional standards and those of the S3 zoning district. You can see that the S3 district has a lower density at 3 dwelling units per acre. The S3 zoning district also has a considerably larger minimum lot area at 12,500 square feet versus the 5,000 square foot in the R4 zoning district. The minimum lot width in S3 is also larger at a minimum of 70 feet. Both districts have the same building height and maximum impervious surface coverage. This slide provides a comparison between some of the allowed land uses in the S3 and R4 zoning districts. So again, those marked with a C are subject to conditions, and those with an S would require special exception approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Lastly, we wanted to provide a potential timeline for rezoning. These dates reflect the normal county council calendar and do not account for any potential special council meetings that may be held. Thank you.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, I
Mr.
do
Warman.
have some questions. Yeah, so thank you for putting this together. I think, you know, actually that proposed timeline is the thing I'm most interested in. And so to initiate that, how would we need to make a motion tonight to actually be on track with that timeline? Okay. Well, look, I'm happy to talk with other folks before making a motion. I was not planning on doing that tonight, but I mean, maybe I would, because I do recall our discussion, and Ms. Honeycutt made a good point that, like, there is a history here where some folks did not initially want S3. And so, you know, that is a concern of mine, but I mean, I do think we would have a lot of time, I guess, to detect that. I have not gone out there to, you know, knock on doors and find out. And as Councilman Moody's pointed out, the representativeness of who shows up is sometimes not always accurate. But I do think these communities are pretty engaged. And so I kind of trust the process on this one. And yeah, I think I would be willing to support something to just kind of put it out there, and, you know, happy to communicate to the community that I'm not happy to pull it back if there is, you know, a genuine desire on the behalf of, you know, most folks out there not to do this. But I think the idea that I'm coming from with this, again, is that the ultimate goal is the overlay district. That is going to be much more finely tuned to, you know, the desires of everybody. Obviously, folks have been working on that for a long time, but my understanding is that the proposed timeline on that is further off.
Right, and if I could, council members.
Yes, sir.
Expand on that a little bit. We met with the community leaders today, this morning.
Very good.
And reviewed the overlay district draft, the first round. There are quite a few things that, we made a lot of headway, but the things that it sounds like the community wants are rather detailed. we relayed to the folks that were in that meeting that to do this properly and right, we would have to go out to the communities at least 2 times, preferably 3 times if needed, which keeps kicking that overlay district adoption further out. And I do want to share that, and I got permission from the community leader today that we met with. The community members met last Thursday evening based on the conversation that council had at the last meeting with this discussion of S3. There were 30 people at that community meeting, my understanding, and they were all in support of doing the S3 zoning as a temporary measure until the overlay gets through. I just wanted to relay that information.
I'll plan on putting that motion out there then, but.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion. I would move.
I would like to
rezone
hear
it
from the
S3.
council person of that area first before somebody puts a motion up. I mean, no?
Yeah.
Okay, so you hang on.
I'll withdraw it. I'll withdraw it.
Okay, so
if
withdraw.
someone else wants to do
Mr.
it.
Boykin
Thank
was
you.
next to be recognized.
Mr. Evans, I just had a question. Would the pending ordinance doctrine come into play after the first reading?
I'll let legal counsel answer that. In the past, we have not done a pending ordinance doctrine under, now, are you talking about the S3 or the amendments? I'm sorry.
If we were to make the motion and it was approved to rezone S3, and then this process starts and it moves along to the readings, is there not a provision that while it's in play that S3 zoning would stop R4?
I will let the legal counsel to answer that because we haven't done that before. It's for us, when we've done amendments, it hasn't been official until the third reading. But if there may be a different way to do it with the pending ordinance. So, yeah.
Counselor, welcome.
When this council adopted the UDO back in 2001, we had a challenge to the ordinance and raised the issue of the pending ordinance doctrine, and for the most part, it didn't assist the county in the litigation, so this council has never utilized that doctrine to its advantage.
I didn't understand the question.
Could you explain the UDO?
Explain the pending ordinance
I didn't
doctrine?
understand the question asked of,
I'm sorry, yes, the
The
pending ordinance,
relevancy.
the pending ordinance. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's exactly as Mr. Councilmember Boykin explained. The council adopts essentially an ordinance, but it hasn't been in final form. And during this period of time where council shows the intention to rezone property or, rezone property in the case in 2000 when we adopted the ordinance, you have an ordinance out there, you are intending to rezone the property, your actions are such that you have an ordinance, but it's not in final form. So during that period of time, the question is there an ordinance pending that binds the council, the county?
thank you. Thanks for the explanation, and if I can.
Floor, Mr. Boykin.
Just to follow up, I mean, the intent and purpose of it is to stop somebody running to the zoning office and sliding in a R4 subdivision while we know we're going to change it to S3, and that's the reason I brought it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaprowski.
And thank you for asking that. I think it is in my district, and it's, of course, we all vote on this. I think it's a step in the right direction, as would the overlay district be. But I also think that there's no rush to change the ordinance on the historic preservation. It's been there since 2018. Now, one iota of the state law has changed since then. But my point is, if you
stick
ask
to
me
this.
my opinion, I am sticking to it. I think this is good. If you're asking me, I'd rather any change to the Historic Preservation Commission, there's no rush. I'd rather this be played out and the overlay district played out before the change is made, if you're asking me how I would look at it. And although I take your word, and I assume that the community would like this zoning change, I think we need the input, and if you're asking what my sense of the community would want, they'd want the zoning change to be in effect, and also the overlay district to be in effect before final decisions on the ordinance commission, which really this affects a way of life again that has been there since the end of the Civil War. And I just think, in view of the magnitude of what's at stake for the people that live there and affects their way of life and what they love and what's unique and special, there's no rush to change you asked me my opinion, until.
The
this
opinion
should
was
be-
asked, what do your constituents think about being rezoned to S3?
Well,
I
I'm
think that
trying to
was the
put it in
question.
context. Yes, it would be a step in the right direction, but I think they would rather this play out and the overlay play out and before the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance is completed and changed. That's my opinion.
Okay.
And there's no rush, and these should be thought out, heard, and in place before the Preservation Commission changes are done. That's my feeling on it. Thank you.
Mr. Sass.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Mr. Evans, I think you said there were 300 and something properties out there, 383 that were in the R4 and 4 and UR right now. The difference to go ahead and try to rezone that whole area, how long would that take? That would involve a lot of community involvement, correct?
So, actually, not necessarily. It's a zoning district that exists to go from R4 to S3. We would just need direction from council for staff to process that. So this would not be a community-driven application. This would be a staff application as directed by county council.
Okay, and that would take less time than developing an overlay
Yes,
district?
that's correct. Yeah, yeah. And I just want to, well, I'm not going to say, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Boykin.
We put this on the next PPW agenda for motion to consider.
Well, this is, we are.
Can we do that? I thought it was just.
I think we
Can
can
we
make
do
the
this?
motion
It was just
today.
only
I
for
was
discussion. I
letting,
didn't know if
if
we
someone
could
else
move
wanted to be
forward
the
on
one to make the motion, I was going to allow that.
The intention was always just discussion, but a motion can be made at any time, so.
Yeah, I would move to direct staff to initiate the process, and Joel, Mr. Evans, I'm sorry if I'm not saying it right, but I would direct staff to initiate the process to rezone to S3, basically.
The R4 parcels. to
Yes,
S3.
to rezone the R4 parcel.
Second.
And the MU, sorry, there's, yeah.
Thank you,
there's-
Mr.
there are
Werman.
4
Seconded.
UR parcels.
Seconded by Mr. Boykin. Discussion, any further discussion? Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to support this. The only concern I've got is this a down zone? It looks like there's a lot of liberties in S3, but is this a down zone?
From a density point of view, it would be considered a downzoning in the zoning world, yes, sir.
I have reservations about that. We have 338, I think, R4s. We heard from 30 community leaders.
Correct.
But that's 10% of the R4 people out there.
Right.
So when we put this out there, I think to Mr. Werman's point, we put this out there, the other 290 come running. This council better be ready to reconsider.
Absolutely.
So
that's-
I'm going to support it at this point, but it's a little bit of a slippery slope when you start blanket downzoning people.
Understand.
Hang on. Did you have anything you want to say? Okay. Mr. Kabrowski.
I just wanted to ask for, sometimes when people are listening and wondering what we mean, a person living there, to explain in ways in layman's terms what a down zone means,
Well,
so that anybody listening would understand it.
it would be a zoning district that would not quite allow the same intensity and density uses that would be allowed in the previous zoning. Yeah.
The other comment I would make to maybe the PIO or Mr. Tootin is that this needs to be advertised. We've got to get the word out that this is, we can't have people come in here at third reading and go, I never heard a thing about this.
So, Mr. Moody, I
Yeah,
will.
I know signs will go up, but go ahead, Mr.
Yes,
Evans.
yeah, I was going to just say.
I know,
yeah,
but this
yeah.
needs to be in the media, this needs to be in the newspaper, this needs to be out there.
We may be sending letters to everybody that's involved, 338 letters to these people, so that way everybody could be contacted and can't say they didn't get it, because a lot of time folks don't read signs, and a lot of time they don't look at social media. So I would request that we send out, certified letters, so that way everybody would be contacted, and that way nobody can have an excuse to say, well, I didn't get notification.
Yes, sir. And we will be mailing all the property owners.
Thank you.
And there will be a sign placed at each property. So there'll be 300 and some odd signs, yes.
All right.
So,
Somebody's gonna be
and-
busy.
And the community as well will be doing their, from my understanding, they're doing their best to notify everybody. They have a list of all the property owners in the 10-mile community, and they're going to be getting the word out as well.
Sign in your yard, you're not going to miss that. Mr. Pryor still has the
And I think, Mr. Moody, that will address your concerns about the 10%. When everybody gets a letter, then all 330 will be 100%. Whether they decide to participate is up to them.
I agree. Okay. Any more discussion?
Very briefly.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make the point out that the point of all of this is just to have a stopgap measure to protect this community as we pursue the overlay district. Is that
Yes,
part of?
yes,
okay.
that, and while we're doing the amendments to the ordinance as well, so that we can, that needs to go forward, because there are things in there about getting character area studies done, and we want those communities to be able to, right now, there's not a process for that. Yes.
Mr. Sass.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. I think that I'm in favor of doing this, of having the larger lot size, the direction this is going in. I am concerned about us rezoning the neighborhood. I think there's support for it. I guess I'm gonna vote for it, because I think it's the right thing to do, but I am a little bit concerned about the neighborhood, and I look forward to hearing what we hear.
Mr. Kaprowski, and then we're going to go to Mr. Worman, then let's call the question after that.
Briefly, thank you. I think it's, again, a step in the right direction. I think it's positive, but I wish it would cause us to pause on the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance and let this run its course and be done, and the overlay district be done before we change the Historic Preservation Commission. That would be my preference, but as a standalone thing, I would support this because it's a step.
Mrs. Honeycutt has not said anything. She has to be recognized, so I'm going to take that back.
I'm done at this point.
And then we're in this.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I cannot support this. This is a downzoning. I understand we're trying to do something stopgap, but I think this is reactionary, and I'm very concerned that a very, very few people have heard about this, and we're making a big decision here, and so for that reason, I simply can't support this.
Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. All right, motion is on the floor and been properly seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay?
Nay.
Vote.
Honeycutt, Sass, and Middleton are no. That's passes. Concludes our meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right, our Finance Committee agenda, approval of the minutes, 10-5.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Reverend Middleton, seconded by Mr. Moody. Any additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Presentation, transportation sales tax update for CARTA. Mr. Mitchum? Couldn't see you there. Been patiently waiting. Had about a 50-minute conversation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Always a pleasure to be with you. It's time again for our quarterly update, and so let me start by saying that our fiscal year is a federal fiscal year, so it's October to September. So we're just wrapping up the books on September. I haven't quite completed that yet, but look like we're once again in the year in the black, as we should. So things are looking good, financially stable. Probably our biggest challenge as it relates to finances is the federal portion of our budget, which is always tied to the approval of a budget. As you know, these days doesn't typically come on schedule and easily, so we continue to watch that and figure out how we could adjust if we get partial allocations or in some cases, sometimes no allocation for a period of time. So, but overall, we're doing well. Our ridership for September was up from last year, 13.2%. Slight increase when we look at year to date. I will say that like you were talking earlier about recruitment, we do use a contract operator. National Transit Express is our contract operator these days. We switched that out in July, primarily due to some performance issues with the previous contractor. What's obviously important for transit is you got to have drivers. The bus has got to be on the road when it's supposed to be on the road. Got to be on schedule if people are going to depend on it and utilize it. So we were having a few issues there. So we have changed up. We have a new contractor. They are continuing to recruit to try to get those drivers back that we need. So we still are short a little bit on the driver's side. So numbers aren't moving as fast as we want in the right direction, but met with them last week and again this morning. They're making some adjustments. So I feel pretty confident that the things they're doing will help us get where we need to be to continue to get the numbers going in the right direction. A couple things I wanted to share with you because I know I heard from a couple of you that you heard about these things, and this was the Route 104 change. That's a situation when we got a surprise one day. The bus was driving down McMillan Avenue, and all of a sudden you couldn't drive down McMillan Avenue. I think you all know that McMillan was scheduled to be closed by the Ports Authority as part of their terminal redevelopment, their yard out there. We knew that was going to happen. We just thought that based on the schedule we'd previously been given, it was 6 months from now. So they kind of forgot to pick up the phone and call us and let us know that it would change. So as a result of that, we had to skip some stops in order to maintain our schedule. Some of those were the businesses out there at the Old Navy Yard. So lots of phone calls and emails about us suspending service. We did not, in fact, suspend service. We had to adjust the route in order to stay on schedule. So we've initiated that process, and it does require us to go through a process. That's one of the things I wanted to point out to you. When we make changes like this, we have to go through a public process to make sure that we're not disenfranchising any component of the community. So it does require public outreach and participation and documentation in what we call a Title VI study. So we've done pretty much all of that now. We were out there last week with the business community and again with the community and at our super stop where we have a lot of riders. No negative comment. One thing I will point out, we did take the opportunity to expand this route. And so this area, as many of you know, is a food desert. And so if you look, we now connect all the way over to Tanger for this particular route so folks can get to the Walmart and be able to get groceries. So it is kind of a win-win. Does require some additional dollars, which we were able to find within the budget. We are working with the Ports Authority. They may be able to help us out. They did have one other issue. There's a free health clinic out there on the old base. Most of the folks coming from the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhoods, would sort of cut through a yard, which the Ports Authority is developing. So they were looking for some help so that we can try to find a way in which to get those folks there without them walking through that yard, since they at some point no longer will be able to do that. So sort of a win-win all the way around as it looks today. We'll continue to monitor and adjust, but just want to let you know, for those of you who had asked about it, that we have found a good solution, I think, and one that benefits the community beyond just meeting the specific needs of the day. Also, I think some of you heard from your staff here at the Charleston County Board of Registration and Election Offices was looking for some additional service to help out with early voting and getting people, since their office is at a different location that wasn't currently served by a route. So we've made that adjustment to coincide with their request. We'll make that a regular adjustment in that schedule periodically at the election times and when there's certain events going on that they're promoting, to try to make sure that people have access to the facility. I'll mention Low Country Rapid Transit. We continue to work on the final system design there. We're initiating the process to complete the design of the O&M facility up behind the old fairgrounds, or the current fairgrounds. We have updated 3 station locations in response to public engagement and some development opportunities. These are actually situations where we've adjusted slightly, and it is actually, based on our modeling, as a benefit, we should see increased ridership. So, and then we're initiating the acquisition process for the property needed for the park and ride at the fairgrounds. So that will follow that traditional federal acquisition process that you're familiar with for highway projects involving federal funds. I wanted to mention our on-demand program. This is part of our effort to look at different ways to meet the need out there with as efficiently as we can. Most of you are familiar with the Telluride vehicles that we have that operate, that transport senior citizens and folks with disabilities. That is a process where they have to be certified to participate in that particular program. Typically, we have 1 or 2 people at a time that ride that. It's fairly expensive for us to do it, so we entered into a conversation with Uber and Lyft about being able to transport some of those folks who don't have, they're not wheelchair bound or don't have limitations where they can't get in a traditional vehicle. They may have some sight limitations, they may use walkers or canes, those sorts of things. All of the drivers that they utilize have agreed to provide a little more customer service than you would typically get from an Uber Lyft. They'll get out and assist people getting in the car, et cetera. So the benefit of that is instead of spending about $35 a trip, we're able to spend, in this case, we're averaging right now about $9.90. So we obviously are saving a good bit of money by doing that. So we're going to continue to look for those kind of options and look for ways to better serve folks at a reduced cost. And this also allows folks to do this. They can do it with their phone for those folks who are comfortable with that, and allows for same-day booking. Typically, if they call in, we're scheduling 24 hours, so this gives them a little bit more flexibility. And then finally, I'll mention some other things that are going on. The transit-oriented development study, we're in phase 2 of that now. We're getting ready to start some roundtables with some development community about the opportunities along the LCRT corridor. I also will mention that we're applying for a 3rd round of funding. MAC, that doesn't require any match. It's 100% federal funds. It's aimed specifically at trying to develop affordable housing opportunities in association with BRT type projects. So obviously that's a big need for us in the community, and we think given our previous experience receiving these grants and performance, that we have a pretty good shot, although competition will be stiff. And then our downtown transit study is progressing. We should see the results of that by the end of the year and be talking about some of the recommendations from that early part of next year. Then I wanted to point out our Luck Country Go van pool program. This is, some of you probably are familiar with Lighthouse for the Blind. They operate actually out of Somerville, so it's a little bit out of Charleston County, but they have Charleston County residents who go there. It's a program specifically designed for people who are visually impaired, gives them the opportunity to work and earn a living. But part of the problem they were having was getting transportation there. So we've been able to find a way in which we've got some volunteer drivers who use our van pools to pick those folks up, transport them down to Somerville, allow them to work a shift, and then bring them back. So I think it's a good program. It's working out for everybody. And then lastly, I'll mention that we are definitely planning for the future. We know, obviously, there's a referendum in the future here. I think Mr. Moody asked the question last time I was here about what happens if we don't get a future referendum, and the answer is we cannot operate everything that we have going now and will have going with LCRT without future funding. So, but as part of that, obviously, we need to be looking at how we would be spending that money. We know we have to provide you with an explanation of how those dollars would be spent and have to be accountable for those dollars. So we've sort of initiated that conversation with the board about what our priorities are going to be, understanding that you're trying to balance transportation, other transportation projects, highways, drainage facilities, green space, as well as transit. So we understand that we have to basically set priorities and sort of negotiate what those priorities are that can be afforded within the budget. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have, but by and large, we're on track to continue to make progress in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchum. Any questions? Thanks for getting us up to date. Thank you very much.
And anytime, just give me a call if you have any questions.
All right, item 3, resolutions.
For approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moody and seconded by Ms. Honeycutt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Move for approval A and B.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moody, seconded by Reverend Middleton. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item 5A, fee ordinance amendments related to historic preservation, request to consider.
Is this staff recommendation, or was this, I'm sorry, this? Staff recommendation? Yeah. I move for staff recommendation.
Moved by Mr. Moody, seconded by Mr. Boykin. Pardon me?
A discussion, or?
Yes, we'll have discussion right now. How about it, Mr. Brodsky?
I just looked through all the fees. Are these all new fees, or there's no reference to what the old fees were? These are these fees that didn't exist before?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
These
thank
are
you.
fees that did not exist before. This is in contemplation of the adoption of the historic preservation ordinance amendments. One key important part within those amendments is the ability for a community to bring to the Historic Preservation Commission and County Council for adoption this idea of a area character appraisal or contributing resources that should accompany a historic district, because it defines the things that make that district historic, and it helps the Historic Preservation Commission in their deliberations and their decisions, because it identifies specific things. For that process to go through, we have as you can see, a small fee to allow the community to present that to the Historic Preservation Commission and to County Council. I know that, for instance, 10 Mile has recently done one, and we want to get that through to County Council as soon as possible. There's not a process right now in the Historic Preservation Commission, in the Historic Preservation Ordinance for that to occur, and this is the fee that would accompany that.
Brief comment. Well, first, thank you for taking the time and trouble to come up with the specific numbers. And second, isn't it the Historic Preservation Commission, by determining the historical settlement communities, have already made a determination? We all know what's unique and
Wow.
special. That's why they were created. And third, I would be in favor if, don't we have one more vote to adopt the changes with third reading? I would say this is premature, so I would be against doing it, as we still have one more round of voting on it to adopt the changes.
And I understand, Mr. Gabrowski.
I understand.
Yeah, we like whatever fees are associated with the ordinance to be coincide to the adoption of an ordinance. And if the ordinance does, for some reason, doesn't, then the fee won't really become an issue, because there won't be really a need for one if we don't have a process to get that through. I just know that some of the historic districts, we've talked to the 10 Mile about it. They've done their area character appraisal. I think they're anxious to get that adopted. Phillips Community has their contributing resources. We would like them to get adopted as well. The Historic Preservation Commission does have, when a historic district does to get designated, they do agree that it's historic, but we want the detailed information that an area character appraisal or contributing resources to go along with that, so that the Historic Preservation Commission can reference those when they make their decision.
I would just hope that those would be decisions that were made before something is designated as a historic preservation community. I would assume those determinations have been made because it's already been designated as a historic
Correct.
settlement community. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. And those would be criteria, I hope,
And we found
before
out.
they're enacted.
Correct. And we found out with the districts that have been designated historic that the area character appraisals or the contributing resources had not been accompanying that designation, which we now realize, and we're learning with these historic districts is a new thing. We're now realizing the importance of having those, and we want a process for that to go forward too. Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Just a comment, for what it's worth, Mr. Gabrowski is a little bit new, and I ran into this too. The planning and zoning fees, department-wide, in my opinion, are never high enough for the amount of work that they do, and that's not just HPC, that's everything they do. It's user fees are I'm a big fan of, and they just never seem to be high enough to cover the amount of work that's done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Mr. Werman? No? Okay. Thank you. No further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 6, Finance Directorate, financial incentives for Palmetto Logistics.
I will move for items A through D.
Discussion.
Sorry.
Moved by Mr. Moody and seconded by Mr. Boykin for A through D, excuse me. And Mr. Dykes is here. I know that Mr. Kobrowski would like a little bit of explanation
Yes, sir.
about those 4. So let's get that explanation, then we'll vote.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Pleasure to be here tonight. And now I'll be able to cover A through C.
A through C. You're right.
Yeah, D
Correct.
is not my terrain.
Correct.
And I'll just say briefly that I've got 3 different requests here. The first one related to the leveraging of additional industrial space in the county, and that's the one for Palmetto Logistics Center. County Council, over the past 7 years, on several occasions, through my deal making, if you will, has helped to leverage the next product that we end up landing jobs in, particularly out in places like Palmetto Commerce Park. This building is a $90 million building that'll be the biggest thing in the Tri-County, 1.3 million square feet. It'll eventually have a very big user in there, perhaps as many as 600 or so jobs based on the amount of parking that's available. And it's coming at a time when as you know, the interchange is being built at Palmetto Commerce Park and I-26, so very timely. But this use of the fee in lieu is very valuable to folks that build these kind of buildings based on predictability of taxes, being able to have a frozen millage, being able to project into the future what a tax bill will be. And it's also attractive from the standpoint of attracting manufacturers as well as distribution to that type of building. So that's why we've done it. And the basic request here is just for us to do a simple fee in lieu of 20 years for this building, with the specifics in millage that you have there in your yellow sheet.
Thank you, sir.
Item 2 is, I'll take 2 and 3 together. These are the annual amendments we do to the multi-county park system. And you may remember that we have a variety of motives for using multi-county park, which is explained in the sheets. Basically, they first come into play as a result of companies that find it desirable to have a corporate income tax break from the state that has been enhanced. And we can enhance those incentives for them by placing property in the multi-county park. The second thing that comes into play is basically anytime we do a deal that requires special source revenue credit, the multi-county park designation is imperative in order to be able to use the SSRC. So those are typically our motives. The second one, item 2, applies to the multi-county park that we created for properties that are in a TIF. This year, we're adding just 1 additional property to that multi-county park. The TIF is a little bit different animal, as you may know, from the standpoint that any kind of increase in the real property tax value, the increment, as it's called, goes toward bonding. In this case, we're putting a property into the Ingleside TIF out in North Charleston. And so this MCP for TIFs that was designed for us takes into account that increment must remain with the TIF, and then we're able to use the remainder of it for the incentives and for the portion that goes to Colleton County and the portion that goes to my department. So this third item is the regular multi-county park, which has existed for quite a while, since 1995. This year, we're placing a total of 13 properties in there on behalf of 11 companies. And these, again, we do this once a year in order not to drive you all crazy and drive the municipalities in Colleton crazy, but this is an accumulation of promises, commitments that we've made over a year. So these are things that have come before you in different forms already, but this year we'll add 13 properties that'll be representative of over 200 million in capital investment and almost 700 new jobs.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So we will vote on 6A through 6D. Is there any question on 6D? Any discussion needed on that one? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. 7, boards and commissions.
I would
Forestry
move
Board.
move for the clerk's recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moody, seconded by Mr. Boykin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Council requested items, elected officials' salaries. Mr. Moody, you want
Yeah, I'll take it.
lead off on that?
I've been kind of beating this drum at the caution of Councilmember Pryor, but as we discussed, I haven't really heard any pushback from other council members, but that this was just about the position, not about the person.
I see your copy.
Yep. And I think the intention was always to give county council and thereby the taxpayers of Charleston County the ability, as newly elected members are placed into service in Charleston County, that the county would have the option of considering a salary something other than what the current elected member gets. It's my understanding, legal, that the current elected members, their salaries cannot be touched. So this would impact anybody coming behind them.
Right.
Following another election and a new official being elected.
Okay. And to that end, I just was one of 9. I asked Mrs. Ham, and she sent out some information from Beaufort County about a county that I believe has successfully managed to do this. And then Mrs. Altenheim and her staff did some recon for us about elected positions around the state and other comparably sized, Ms. Altenheim, counties.
Sorry, yes, these are counties in the state that have populations of over 200,000.
Okay, so and then she amended the chart further to include the name of the elected official and their years of service. So where I think this gets to is the filing fee, and as I understand it from legal, the filing fee is based on the annual salary. So as long as the annual salary stays like it is, the filing fee stays like it is, whoever comes behind has paid that filing fee they're due to get that salary. So I understand that we have got to try to come up with a starting salary for if we were inclined to move this along, that we've got to determine what a starting salary would be for each of these roles. I've got some ideas, but I'd just love to hear if there's any discussion out there.
Mr. Werman?
I guess I have a question. So it wouldn't affect anyone currently in the position, but they would get the advantage. Not that I mind about them being currently elected folks being able to pay a lower filing fee, but I'm just saying, like, they would, the filing fee for everyone, I mean, you can't have multiple filing fees, obviously, so the filing fee goes down even if their actual salary stays there, because we've designated this as sort of the, not nominal, but the potential restarting level, I guess. Is that accurate?
I think that's right.
Yes, sir. Generally
Okay.
speaking, the concept is that if council were to set a salary for an elected office, then it's simple to calculate the filing fee based on a salary that council would set. For example, members of council here have a set salary, and there's a filing fee that's based on that set salary. So the concept's the same.
Maybe I'm a little confused as to how they stay for the folks who are there, but if that's the case, then that's the case. So.
If I understand, Mr. Chairman, if I understand what he's saying, if let's just grab one. The auditor is making $125,000 a year. Let's say and I just throw a number out there. Let's say Charleston County said the starting salary for an auditor is $110,000 a year. Would the incumbent and any new candidates filing for that office pay one based on the starting salary of $110 if that were what we selected?
Yes, sir. So my understanding is that the election commission surveys counties to determine and asks for what is the salary for this position, rather than providing two numbers, i.e. here's the salary set by council, and here's the number that here's the salary the incumbent is currently making. We would just simply provide that set salary. Again, this is prospective entirely.
Thank you. Mr. Boykin?
I'll just go ahead and say that, you know, I think there's a marked difference than an incumbent who's held the office for a tenure and has earned those raises over that time versus someone who's never held that office coming in and getting the benefit of the person that came before him without putting the work in or possessing the experience. And so I think there is some equity in having a base salary for someone other than the incumbent should they win.
Mr. Reverend Middleton?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think when we initially contemplated, getting this study out there, it was trying to make equitable more or less the steps and missteps and, areas where some elected officials, based on county council's prerogative to incentivize an elected official based on, meritorious service as it related to the council's opinion at that time, and then creating a situation where that person is now paid much more than some of the other elected officials as it relates to parity in and around their area. I would certainly not be in favor of a set fee. Our county council salary is exactly the same. None of us, unless we raise our own salaries, gets a dime more than the other person.
Except the chair.
Except the chair. Yes, ma'am. And the individual who is elected behind us, like I'll be up for re-election next year, and whoever comes behind me will get the exact same thing. And I feel like I've given great service over these last 4 years and have the hard knocks to prove it, but they would come in green and still get the exact same pay. These individuals, as it relates to the salary, and certainly it's unfortunate in some cases where we have an inflated salary based on a certain office, and others, do not necessarily seem to be commensurate. But I do feel that whatever the salary is, when the new person is elected, they ran, some people are, not to say that people are running to receive a salary, but many people are running and they already know, what this salary is, and have some, I would hate to say it, but I mean, if I'm looking at any one of these jobs, well, I'm going to run to be the sheriff. I have no experience, but I see that whopping salary there, and I would expect that if I win and I paid that filing fee, that would be the incoming salary that I would expect to make.
Mr. Chair.
I certainly am not for the changing of the structure just because an individual is brand new and does not have the experience of someone who may have been serving in the role for so many years. Last thing I'll say, in county government, well, I won't say that because again, well, we have to be so careful, when we're talking about the elected officials as opposed to persons that we are appointing and persons that we are hiring and individuals who just walk in the door the first time in a role and they're making a whopping salary based on whoever came behind them. And so I would simply remind us to be consistent in the things that we do to make certain that we are not being inconsistent.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Yes, sir,
Briefly.
Mr. Boykin.
So I hear everything Councilmember Middleton's saying, but I think I need to be clear on my point. If it's the incumbent, they will be entitled to the salary that they have running again. If it's someone other than the incumbent, there will be a stated salary for every one of these positions that they will only be entitled to. They will not be entitled to ride on the coattails of someone who's sat in office for 10, 15, 20 years. That doesn't seem equitable because they haven't spent the time in that office and borne that responsibility to have earned those pay raises. It's like giving the works of someone to someone who hasn't worked at all.
Mr. Chair, again, I'm making the same point, and I did understand that point when you made it earlier, and it has always, not to say that we should do things the way we've always done them, because I've tried to change that with the virtual versus in-person meeting, and you see how that went. I still, again, say that individuals who have run for these offices many of whom have had no elected experience in those offices, and they have had experience in that field, which then qualifies them in some way. So if I'm an auditor by profession and training and whatever, void an individual who then runs for an office that they have no compatible experience, that would be certainly an anomaly of an individual who would then walk into a job making $178,000 and they were never even a police officer or they were never even in law enforcement, something of that nature. Yeah.
Hold on.
I would just respond real briefly. The converse of that is we just set a base salary and it only moves by inflation or adjusted for inflation, and then those employees never get a raise. It's just set. And then as it goes up, that's the going rate. But what we've done is we've rewarded performing people in those positions with these. That's why these raises get so high from the tenure. And I think there's a disconnect here where, take a Sheriff Al Cannon who had been there for a long time and rose to that level of salary, and you've got someone who's never been sheriff coming in that door who I feel like they're benefiting from the work they've not done. And I think there is a base level, as Mr. Moody was talking about, that these positions probably need to be at, and that can be determined in a fair and equitable way. Sorry.
Mr. Warren?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking this out in real time. I got to say, I think, Councilman Boykin, I think you're right. I mean, there's definitely folks coming, there's definitely this discontinuity of someone getting sort of a salary that was designed with someone with much more experience in mind. I guess maybe I'm sort of wondering if that, I don't know if you were saying that would be a bad result, but as far as the result of, I'm sorry, you said the converse of that is we just don't do that sort of thing anymore, where it's just a straight, there's a salary, and then there's sort of an inflationary thing. That it moves. I think that is where we
time,
go.
and as the cost of living or whatever you want to put a percentage on it, it just moves that way. But what that does is it obstructs someone who's done a great job as an elected official from being rewarded for it. So there's the pro and the con.
I know. I get it. There's a pro and a con there. I guess I would say I'm a little uncomfortable, and I can't quite put my finger on it, with the idea that you've got one person running. And I think it's more the idea of if we think the salary attracts people, what does it? I guess it sort of benefits the incumbent if you really think that you're going to get $150,000 for the incumbent, but you're going to get $100,000 sort of class, whatever elected official who's going to challenge them. I don't know. There's some odd quirks about it, and I just think we shouldn't have ever mixed the idea of kind of looking at this from sort of an employee's traditional business perspective and sort of an elected perspective. I don't know. I think they don't mix too well, but we have, and so we got to figure out some way out of it. So I don't know. I'm thinking this out as we kind of sit here.
I also wanted to say that when looking at, particularly, you called the name of Al Cannon. Well, when Al Cannon was elected sheriff, the county was totally different. And meaning in size, in the amount of individuals who he was supervising, in the law enforcement, needs, as it relates to the county itself has grown. Even county government has grown. The things that we do as it relates to where we are now, when we're looking at each of these offices, the auditor, treasurer, all of these people, they have remarkably more responsibility in some cases than the individuals day one when persons who were in those jobs. So when looking at where these positions are now, you need executives and individuals who are able to run large offices. We saw that in the Register of Deeds office, how that didn't really work very well when you don't have an individual who is, well, I can't say that, whatever the case. And so when we have offices and individuals who run for these offices who have skills and abilities based on their backgrounds, if they're running for the office and the salaries are public, they've already seen that. And so now saying that we're going to set like a base salary.
If I may briefly respond, Mr. Chair, very briefly.
Mr. Kowalski in here.
Many of these positions of which you speak have prerequisites to hold office. To be sheriff in South Carolina, you've had to have been a certified law enforcement officer in this state with at least, I think it's 1 year experience with a 4-year degree and it's more years experience. But what I'm saying is that's a bare minimum. That doesn't mean that somebody's got a doctoral degree or a master's degree or 25 years experience. Somebody could come in here with the bare minimum qualifications and be drawing the same salary as someone with much more experience and much more qualified, simply based on the outcome of a vote by the public. So I'm sorry.
I'd just like to say, if I could, that it's not up to us to weigh the qualifications and how a person's doing. The only people that get to do that are the voters. If they vote the person in and the person's qualified, we shouldn't get a say that we think they're doing a good job, they're more qualified, they have degrees. And the only person that gets to decide that is the voters decide that. And I'd be for a set salary. Somebody wants to run for that. I don't think there should be a step increase. I mean, if we feel that the pay is not enough, we can raise the pay. But anybody running for an office should have a set amount, and the only people that get to decide, as long as that person's legally qualified, is the voters. And the only people that get to judge how they're doing and their qualifications are the voters. And we don't have any business deciding if the person's doing a good job or not. That's not up to us. I do think Mr. Moody has a good point in the sense that if somebody's been there for 20 or 30 years and have gotten step increases all those times, that would be an unfair basis to set the pay for if he's not or she's not running again. So I think I would be in favor of a set salary with no step increases. If the person doesn't want to run again, don't run again. And the only people that get to decide if they should be reelected, if they're doing a good job, as long as they're really qualified are the voters, set a set salary. Nobody's forcing anybody to run for anything. That's just how I would view it.
Mr. Moody? Mimi. He's pointing at me. Look, I think we should direct staff to do what Buford did in paragraph, it's 2347A. It says the salaries were established using average salaries of peer counties and Tier 1 classification as determined by population. So I think it's very easy to determine what the appropriate salary, entry salary is for any of these elected positions. Quite frankly, we need an adjustment because we've had lots of positions where we have people that have been in office for 20-something years. And so we just need to address this. It's time. We've kind of kicked it off for a long time. So I'd like to go ahead and, I don't think we need to make a motion of it, but direct staff to come back to us with the same type of base salary levels that are listed in 2347 entry level salaries for these various electeds.
Mr. Moody?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was going to do the same thing with Ms. Honeycutt, and I appreciate that. I just had a couple comments listening to this has been a very great discussion. It's what I intended when I asked staff to do this. A couple things that I shared with Reverend Middleton, one of his concerns about, what if my father was a CPA, so what if a CPA ran for and won the treasurer's office? By setting a minimum salary, I think then council would have the flexibility to come in and go, well, this guy wasn't a hair barber that came in and won this office. This lady is a person, is a CPA. Maybe they deserve more than the $120,000 salary we set. Or if an attorney won the probate judge role, that we might say instead of that salary being $150 or whatever it is, we would say that person is an attorney. They're not a preacher or a banker. They're eminently more qualified to serve that role. So then council would have the flexibility, but we wouldn't just automatically assume that. But I agree. This is something that needs to happen. I'm concerned about also the increases. When elected officials run for office, they know what the number is. We don't get pay increases. So left unchecked, some of these numbers, what do they get? Ms. Altline, what do they get? What do the electeds get as far as raises go, or annual increases?
They get whatever the middle merit is. It's been running about 2% each year.
Also, are there two bumps, or is there one bump? What are the bumps?
I'm sorry?
Is it just that they get an increase every year based on the middle?
On what the middle merit is.
Okay.
And that's been running about 2%.
Okay, so these numbers left unchecked with the raises and the annual bumps will continue to escalate. So I'm not a fan of those annual increases. We don't get increases, and not that any of us are looking for it, but they're electeds just as well. I mean, the state reps don't get bumps. The state senators don't get bumps. Our Congress people don't get bumps. Why do they get bumps? So I think we ought to consider that in the recommendation as well, Ms. Honeycutt, that maybe we ought to review that as well. No, understanding again that this does not, you can't by law, Ed, I think, impact electeds, but this is for who follows afterwards.
Just a final comment. I just, again, I'm nervous about any of us making judgments on the qualifications of an elected official.
We're
If
not
they
voters,
qualify for the position, I don't think we have any business saying that this person's a CPA or attorney. If the man or woman running for an office qualifies legally for the office they're running, the salary ought to be set. And it's none of our business how we consider their qualifications or education. It's only for the people who elect a person to decide that. And if they don't think they're qualified, they can get them out of office next time. But I agree, it should just be set the same. I don't think there should be increases. And if the person doesn't want to run again, it's not enough money, they don't have, nobody's forcing them to run.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting us have that discussion.
Thank you.
My
I would
request.
like to add
Yep.
that if we were to set this, everybody who was going to run would know what it was going to be when they started out. It'd be just like knowing now what the salary is. And so I think that's really fair. I think that's good. I like Ms. Honeycutt's idea that staff go work on this and come back. And I want to say this is a really good spirited discussion on something we need to have a good talk on. I thank y'all all for it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, I will be in San Antonio, Texas next week, so I will not be here, and I'll try to join virtually if I'm allowed, but I will be in San Antonio, Texas next week.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.